What's the craziest thing you put your body through? I traveled across the continent on a bicycle. Several years ago, I loaded a bunch of camping gear onto my bicycle and spent the better part of the next 7 months riding 5,300 miles, 8,500 kilometers, around the western US solo. I think the whole trip pretty well answers your question, but one day in particular stands out. At night, I most often preferred to wild camp. Rather than paying for a proper campground, I would simply find somewhere to disappear into the woods at night, somewhere people were unlikely to find me and even less likely to care that I was there. One night, I started coming down with food poisoning. Alone in the woods, I spent the night tossing and turning and leaning out the door of the tent to vomit. The next morning, the bike got a flat tire right away, and after fixing that, I rode for half a day through cold rain to a motel for some proper rest. 10 out of 10 would still recommend cycling across a continent. 2. I was pulled out of the back of a truck when I was 19 at roughly 75 miles an hour and survived. I was sitting in the back with a friend, facing each other, backs to the side of the truck near the wheel well. I had a thick leather coat I was sitting on for comfort and decided to put it on to ward off a slight chill. I got one arm in and as I pulled the coat behind me, the wind snatched me out. Literally, kite me to almost half standing. I couldn't, in a millisecond, catch my balance and wind hit my head and I went over the back. Years of jujitsu saved my life. I just tucked into a ball and rolled. And rolled. Sky, ground, sky, ground. Swear to God it felt like I rolled for 20 minutes and thought I was slowed down enough to stop myself. I promptly folded my arm under myself trying to stop the rolling and slammed my head into the ground, but stayed alert and retucked to keep rolling. This was about 2 or 3 a.m. We were all drunk. It was a very rural area. I didn't go to the ER. Skinned my face badly, head badly, shoulder and hands, lots of missing skin. The coat that betrayed me also saved a lot. It wore all the way through it before it started into my shoulder. I bandaged myself when I got home with help of my girlfriend, who was in the front of the truck that night. I learned later that day the difference between regular and non-stick gauze as I had to reopen every wound to peel the regular gauze out of my wounds. My head began swelling. By about 12 hours, there was a half-inch of fluid across my entire dome. My head was squishy. The fluid was beginning to push into my eyebrow ridgeline and I was worried I was going to go blind, so I went and saw a doctor at like 4 a.m., right before he closed. He freaked the hell out and had the emergency room waiting for me. They brought in half the medical staff to look at me. Not because they were all doing stuff, I think I was more of a morbid circus curiosity. CAT scans, MRIs, finally painkillers, redressing everything after some debriding. Apparently if I was going die, it would have been like 10 hours ago. They sent me home. A friend of ours died 2 years later falling out of a Jeep at like 15 miles an hour. I don't know honestly how I survived. 3. I have done a couple triathlons, a marathon, and an adventure race, none of which very fast. The craziest thing though was a hike I tried to do one summer in Arizona. I did a loop trail that I thought was about 18 miles, it turned out to be about 21. I was out of water by mile 10, but I thought, it's downhill now so it won't be so tough. There were 1,000 logs fallen over the trail from the winter storms and it was very tiring climbing over them constantly. My kidneys started hurting and I could feel serious dehydration and heat stroke setting in. My muscles ached and every step was excruciating. There were multiple streams and rivulets where I could have gotten water, but my mind was not thinking right and paranoia about diseases kept me from drinking. In my mind I just had to keep going or I was going to die on that trail. Fortunately, I had a large sports drink waiting in the car and I made it back. But I think that is the closest I have come to things going terribly wrong or death. I've heard stories of people in similar situations making bad decisions like going off trail, turning around, or just losing their bearings, and I felt like that could have been me. 4. When I was 20 years old and at the peak of my powers I got into a serious eating contest. My opponent was my good friend. He was 6'4" and 285 pounds versus my 6'1", 205 pounds. We were roommates at the time, and as young men do, we often boasted of our abilities, until at last the time came to stop the talk and get to the walk. The arena was the old country buffet and the loser pays. No pause, no puke and a 3-hour limit. We went on a Tuesday to minimize the collateral damage amongst the innocent. We sat and got down to it. We matched plate for plate. Roast beef, mashed potatoes with gravy, green beans, carrots and corn. Glass after glass of whole milk. For 2 hours and a half we did battle, neither giving an inch. After the 8th plate, stomach groaning in pain, I was hurt and sweating but I sensed weakness. I lurched to my feet. Concede? I croaked. Never, I knew I was close to my limit. I had to end it once and for all. My nemesis hulking behind me, I took one last dinner plate and headed to the dessert bar. I went straight to the bread pudding. I needed mass. I covered the entire dinner plate full. Brendan. This is where we separate the men from the boys, I said. I went to the soft serve ice cream machine and opened the tap. I covered the dinner plate full of bread pudding completely with chocolate/vanilla swirl ice cream, mounting it high. No way, he muttered, incredulous and perhaps a bit scared, but still he made a similar plate. We returned to the table and I took up my spoon. I looked him dead in the eye. Halfway through he pushed the plate away. He slumped back, hurt, beaten. Without pause, without breaking eye contact, I ate it all. Last week I turned 52. We're still friends. At least once a year it comes up. And it still makes me laugh.